Okay, all right, ladies and gentlemen, you are there now. Hello, 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 hello. Yes, guys, as usual, we need to give gratitude to God. Because without God, as I always say, there's nothing we can achieve. On the more serious note, it's very, very important, right? Because you see, you are here today to learn. God have given you an opportunity. It's a blessing. There are a lot of people that are aspiring to be where you are now, but they are not able. It's not that we deserve anything. There is nothing we deserve from God. So we need to give Him the gratitude for being with us and providing us the opportunity to be here. And anything you want to do in life, it's still very important that you commit it into the hands of God and pray for His, ask for His guidance to guide you. And once you are under the guidance of God, I'm telling you, there is no way you will not be able to achieve. No matter how difficult it is, God is going to provide you the strength to navigate whatever, no matter how difficult it is, right? So, on this note, I would like us to commit everything that we're going to do today, this morning, this afternoon, into the hands of God, and humbly ask for His wisdom to guide us through. Right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, yesterday we talked about planning. Right? Planning is very important. You see, people get disorganized because they don't plan. Right? There is no two ways about it. If you don't plan, there is no how you're gonna succeed. You might succeed somehow, somewhere, but when you it get to complex situations, yourself you're gonna get confused because you didn't prepare for it. So we talk about planning in terms of knowing in advance what you intend to achieve, and as well knowing how to achieve or go about in terms of achieving what you want to achieve. You must focus, God, right? So we talked about that, and we talked about the basic characteristics, right, of a good plan. Let's put it that way, if you will. I said it must be flexible, right? We talk about flexibility. You, as an individual, you should be somebody that is flexible as well. If yourself is not flexible, or if, let me put it in the context of business or plans. If your plan is not flexible, once it gets to a situation whereby you need to make some changes, you will not be able to adjust. And that thing can make the plan to fail, right? Because when you are planning, remember you plan in terms of what you're going to do in future. Like I explained yesterday, you are not God. It's only God that can say this is what is going to happen, and obviously it happens like that, right? So you are a human being. So when you plan in terms of what you need to achieve in future, by the time it gets to time of implementation, in reality, things might not be like that. That would, of course, necessitate you to make some adjustment, right? So if your plan is not flexible, you'll not be able to adjust as such, right? Then we talked about the characteristics of uh, being realistic, right? We say a good plan must be smart. Smart. You know what we mean by smart? SMART, right? It must be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. Right. So I gave you a simple example yesterday of which we talked about it, and I believe you understood it. Right. So today we are going to talk about different types of planning in terms of relating it to planning scenarios. You got what we call long term plan, right? Long term planning. We got medium-term planning as well as short-term planning. Right? You must have done this in the management practice, haven't you? Oh, right. When we are talking about long-term planning, it contains the broad goal, missions of an organization, right? A long-term planning, it has something to do with the what or where the business wants to be, perhaps, let's say in 5 to 6 years' time. That is a long-term plan. In other words, we call it a strategic plan, right? Which is a broader plan. Then after that, you have what we call the medium-term plan, which is the tactical plan, right? Whereby you tend to break down the broader plan, which is the strategic plan, into a feasible or a doable strategy or plan. Then from there, you derive what we call operational plan, right? Operational plan has something to do with day-to-day activities. So for medium-term plan, it's about 1 to 3 years. Then the one for operational plan is for daily activities, right? So those things are very important. Those concepts are very important that you need to know. In the exam, you might be asked such questions. So you should be able to distinguish between strategic, uh, strategic plan, which is the broader plan, then a tactical plan as well as operational plan. Right. So that is for that. Now we are going to talk about the stages of planning. Right. We have essentially about 8 steps or stages, as you may like it, or as you may deem it fit, if you will, of planning. Then the first step is to identify threats and opportunities. Right. Hello. Hello. You can't do that. Yes. Hello. We are recording this thing. It's not only you that is looking at this video. You must be serious. We are not here to play. Right? You must be serious. Okay, so we have what we call the first step. The first step is for you to identify threat and opportunities, right? Threat and opportunities. That is the first step that you need to uh, initiate first before we can be able to talk about you planning on how to achieve something. You need to identify the threat. What are the threats? Something that can make you not to achieve your objectives or goals. So those ones constitute what we call threats. Then you need to research as well while identifying the various threats, opportunities that are available that you could leverage for you to be able to achieve your objectives. Right? That is the first step. You scan around, you do a kind of a survey, to be able to see or to identify where threats are as well as the opportunities, right? Then, having done that, the next step is for you to formulate your objectives, right? Things that you need to achieve, right? So, having formulated your objective, there are certain assumptions that needs to be made, right? Things that people normally take for granted. So that is the step 3. Then the step 4, you need to identify alternative plans. Right? Hey, focus, please. Focus is very, very important. Right? You will distracting the class. So the next step is for you to, what did I say? Identify alternative plans. What do we mean by alternative plan? A rational human being. You know what I mean by rational? Somebody that is wise, right? When you are planning, you don't just pick up one option, then you plan around that. You need to come up with different options. You know what I mean by options? Alternatives, right? If plan A doesn't work, what is going to happen? I can back on plan B, right? Like I said yesterday, I remember I told you that it's a foolhardy. You know what I mean by foolhardy? Foolishness for somebody to put the whole of one's eggs in one basket. So if eventually something happens to that basket, what is going to happen? Then you are gone. Do you understand what I mean? Right. So if you are rational in your decision making or you are rational in your thinking, you cannot do that. You must always have a room for an alternative. Right. That is why when you are formulating your plan, there should be room for alternative. Perhaps you can come up with option A if you like, B, C, D, right? And once you are able to identify the options, you need to play around with those options by doing what we call feasibility study. Feasibility. Yeah, you need to be able to establish among the various options the one that you can optimally maximize your benefits. Right. You know what I mean by to optimize benefit, maximize the one you know that's gonna benefit you most. Then you choose that. Then after that, you select the final plan. Which one gonna be the final plan? The one that have the maximum benefit, right? Yeah. So when you've done with that, then you have to, of course, draw up your budget because every task, every activities, always goes with spending. Right. You must always make up your budget in terms of how much is going to cost you and yeah, how you are going to execute your plan. Then, having made your budget in terms of how much is going to cost you, then you execute your plan. So this is how it goes essentially, right? For you to be able to make draw up a rational plan, it has to pass through perhaps these age stages for you to be able to formulate a good plan that is doable. If you like, you can call it a plan that is implementable. Right. So that is how the steps that you need to take. Now, we need to talk again about today about action plan. You know what is action plan? Action plan. Action plan. Right. Sorry? Yeah, plan of action. Right? Because once you formulate, say, okay, this is what I need to do, right? You need to put it into practice. That is what we are trying to say here. We say action plan, right, must have the following information, right? What must be done, the person that needs to do it, and the date. It's like a roster. You know what is a roster? How many of you have seen a roster here? Yeah. Or a schedule, right? So once you've decided this is what I need to do, right? You need to look for someone that needs to do it and the time the specific task needs to be done and the resources that are required to do the task. Those things must be specified. Rest. Sorry? What you say? The period is over. Okay. Can you help me switch it off? We stop.